Hello and welcome to What's in the Night Sky for February 2022. I'm Hayley, and this month I'm going to talk to you about how to spot 5 planets. I'm going to talk to you about the Sea of Showers on the Moon and how that was formed, the launch of the James Webb Space Telescope, and our constellation of the month, which is Cassiopeia, the Queen. Let's begin by taking a look at 3 of the 5 planets that you can look out for this month. These ones you'll need to be up nice and early in the morning. So you can see here that I am on the 1st of February, and I'm going to just go through the night and into the morning of the 2nd to about 6 o'clock. And you can see that if you look towards the southeast, you've got the planet Venus, and that rises just before 6 o'clock. If we just go onwards a little bit with time, you can see that Mars is coming up as well. And throughout the month in the morning, you'll be able to spot Venus and Mars just before sunrise. If we continue through the month, you'll see that Mercury is coming up to join them as well. And you can see that even though we're still 6:30, it's starting to get lighter as we go through the month because the nights are getting shorter. So you need to bear that in mind as well. Mercury reaches greatest eastern elongation on the 16th, and that means that it's furthest away from the sun. So that tends to be the best time to look for Mercury. So let's go to the 16th, and you can see now that by 6:30, the sky is beginning to brighten, getting ready for the sun to rise. So the trick is, as always with these things, is to observe when it's still as dark as possible, but you can spot the planets above the horizon. So it does depend on you having a nice clear horizon and not lots of trees and buildings in the way. But if you do manage to do that, you should be able to spot Venus, Mars and Mercury making an isosceles triangle in the sky around the middle of the month. And then as the month goes on, you'll need to probably go out a little bit earlier to spot them because you can see that everything's just getting so much brighter. So here we go. I've gone back to 6 o'clock now. In the middle of the month, and you've still got Venus and Mars nicely visible while it's still dark. So that's the first 3 of the planets. I did say that you would be able to see 5 planets this month. So we've had a look at Venus, Mars and Mercury. If we go back into the evening sky now, so I'm going to go back to the beginning of February and into the early evening, 7 o'clock sort of time, and you should be able to see after sunset the planet Jupiter. I'm just going to go a bit earlier because it seems to have set. There we go. So just after sunset, you'll be able to see Jupiter, and Jupiter will set quite early. So you won't see it very high, and it will set quite early, but it's still fairly well placed to be able to catch a glimpse. And as always with Jupiter, if you have your binoculars or a telescope, then you may be able to spot the 4 Galilean moons, and you may be able to spot some of the features of the disk as well, the north and south equatorial cloud bands. If you've got a modest sized telescope, you might be able to even spot the great red spot on Jupiter as well. If we go to the 2nd, then Jupiter should be joined by the crescent moon. Just after sunset, and it's a really thin crescent because the moon is new on the 1st, so you've got this slither of a crescent moon just below Jupiter just after the sun sets. And then as the sky starts to get darker, the moon will set, followed by Jupiter. If we stay with the moon and go on to the 7th, that will give you an opportunity to see the final planet that I want to tell you about this month. So you can see up here we've got the moon and Uranus really, really close. So if you've never seen Uranus before, this is a good opportunity to try and spot it, just because the moon is a really good marker, and the light from the moon will wash out some of the light from the planet, so that does make it a little bit tricky. But if you have a pair of binoculars, you should be able to get them in the same field of view. So this field of view represents what you might see through a pair of 10 by 50 binoculars, which you can use any binoculars you like, but if you're buying binoculars specifically for astronomy, then I would recommend starting with 10 by 50, because you get a really good combination of magnification and aperture, but they're not too heavy. And if you don't know about binoculars and you want to understand what the numbers mean, 10 is the magnification of the binoculars, so they will magnify whatever you're seeing, make it seem 10 times bigger. And the 50 is the diameter of each of the objective lenses on the front of the binoculars, 50 mil. So that's what those two numbers mean when you're looking at binoculars. Let's stay with the moon now and have a look at our lunar feature for this month. So I'm just going to take us to the 16th, because that is when full moon occurs in February, and that will just help me to point some things out to you. So if you are observing the moon with the naked eye, the main features that you might see are the Sea of Crisis up here, the Sea of Tranquility, the Sea of Serenity, the Sea of Showers, which we're going to talk about in a second, the Ocean of Storms, this big one over here, the Copernicus and Kepler craters over here, and the Tycho crater down here. Those are the main things you might pick out with your naked eye. The thing I want to talk in a little bit more detail about is the Sea of Showers over here. So I'm ringing that with my mouse now, or the Mare Imbrium. And that was created when a protoplanet-sized object, so a huge object, smashed into the moon and created this huge lava flow, which then solidified into the Imbrium Basin that we see here. It is about 750 miles across, and it's surrounded by grooves and gashes on the lunar surface that were thought to have been created by chunks of the impactor flying off and scarring the surface of the moon when they landed. And some of those are big enough that you would be able to see them with a small telescope. So if you train your telescope, if you have one, on this area and look for these gashes in the surface, and know that they were probably formed by the impactor that caused the Sea of Showers to be formed. The Apollo 15 mission also landed near here. So this area here between the Sea of Serenity and the Sea of Showers is the Apennine mountain range, and the Apollo 15 mission landed in the Hadley Rill, which is just in the shadow of those mountains, and around the place where you can see my mouse pointer now is where the Apollo 15 mission was exploring. Let's move on to our constellation of the month now, which is Cassiopeia the Queen. So Cassiopeia is a circumpolar constellation from the UK, so it's one that is always visible in the night sky. You will always be able to spot it somewhere, and it is a good one to spot because it's fairly bright. So it's not as easy to spot as things like the Big Dipper and Orion, but it's fairly distinctive, and even if you're in an area that's a little bit light polluted, you'll probably still be able to find Cassiopeia. If you are struggling to locate it, so you can see it here looking like a W or an M, then let's just make it a bit darker. There we go. A way to locate it is to find the Big Dipper. So you can see we've got the Big Dipper over here, and you can use the Big Dipper to locate the pole star by using these two stars in the pan of the Big Dipper, as we've talked about before, and following them to find Polaris, the pole star. Once you've done that, if you then find one of the stars in the handle of the Big Dipper and draw a line from the star in the handle through Polaris and follow it, that will take you to Cassiopeia. So that's just a little star hopping way of finding the constellation of Cassiopeia. If we put the art on, you can see that Cassiopeia is depicted as a queen in a chair. So in ancient Greek mythology, according to legend, she boasted that she was more beautiful than the sea nymphs, and her boasting angered the god Poseidon, god of the sea, who sent a sea monster, Cetus, to ravage the kingdom. And to pacify the monster, Cassiopeia's daughter, the Princess Andromeda, who you can see depicted over here, the constellation of Andromeda, was left tied to a rock by the sea. And the sea monster was about to devour her when Perseus, the hero, looked down upon her from Pegasus, the flying horse, and Perseus rescued the princess, and they all lived happily ever after. The gods were so pleased that all of the characters from the story were elevated to the heavens as stars. Only Cassiopeia suffered the indignity of being bound to the chair and placed in the heavens, so that as she revolves around the pole star, she spends half of her time upside down. Things to spot in the area around Cassiopeia, if we take the art off, you can have a look for M52, Messier 52, which is an open cluster, which hopefully, there we go. So open cluster, salt and pepper cluster. So an open cluster of stars, which is quite an easy object with binoculars. So if you have a pair of binoculars, it will appear as a hazy patch. If you have a telescope, then you will see it, if you have a reasonable sized telescope, you'll see it as a dense V-shaped cluster of stars just below Cassiopeia. The other thing you can do is right next door to Cassiopeia, you've got the constellation of Andromeda, and here we have the Andromeda galaxy, and it's always worth having a look for that if you are exploring this region of sky, because it is the nearest galaxy to us, and it is the most distant object that you can see with your naked eye. If you want to try and spot it with your naked eye, then you need to be in a relatively dark location because it's really faint. The object itself is larger than the full moon, but it's really faint, so you'll just see it as a little fuzzy patch. If you have a pair of binoculars, you'll see it as a slightly bigger fuzzy patch, but it's definitely worth putting your binoculars on it if you have them. And it's about 2.5 million light years away. So when you're looking at that, you're seeing something as it appeared 2.5 million years ago, which is quite amazing. And that leads me kind of nicely on to talking about the James Webb Space Telescope, which was launched in December on Christmas Day. And one of the things that the James Webb Space Telescope will be studying is galaxies, except that it will be studying galaxies in the early universe. So it will be looking back in time to just around 400 million years after the Big Bang, to the origins of the universe, and it will be looking at the birth of the first galaxies, many times fainter than Andromeda, much too faint for us to study with any earthbound telescope, and it really will increase our understanding of what was going on in those early times, and that's just one of the things it will be doing. It'll be doing lots and lots of exciting science, so lots to look forward to with the James Webb Space Telescope. If you want to do some activities at home around the James Webb Space Telescope, there's a hashtag, #WebAtHome, on social media, and you can have a look at that for inspiration, and you'll see people baking James Webb cookies or building models of the James Webb Space Telescope, all sorts of things that you can do whilst learning about the James Webb. Let's finish by taking a look at the International Space Station. As always, you can find out when the International Space Station passes will be for your location using the Spot the Station website. So I'll just show you one of them, which is going to be on the 2nd of February, starting around 4 or 5 minutes past 6. So quite a good one if you've got young children, because it's just after dark. And you can see it's risen already there. So the International Space Station rising in the west, tracking across the sky, and you should be able to follow that happen. So if I just start time, and you can see the way that it tracks across the sky and sets again in the east, taking 5 or 6 minutes, and it will be nice and bright, so you should be able to easily spot that one. So that brings me to the end of our What's in the Night Sky tour for February 2022, and I'll be back again next month to talk to you about what you can see in March.